Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Endless Endeavor podcast with myself, Greg Anderson. This is going to be episode 9, and today's guest is a really good friend of mine. We've been kicking it for what?
2007?
2007?
Yeah.
So we met originally through jiu-jitsu, like I have with half of my friends, but he's been career law enforcement officer. He has a tremendous amount of experience as an officer and as a trainer, and held various positions within his agency. And he just has a ton of knowledge in that realm. And over the last month or two, we've had a lot of conversations regarding the current climate of law enforcement in our country. And we just thought it'd be good to share our perspectives and bounce ideas back and forth, and just kind of take you guys on a ride that's based on a perspective from two guys that have been there and done that, and help you guys understand what people within the profession would like to see change, because contrary to popular belief, cops aren't very happy with what's going on in the country either right now. Mm-mm. And so from the beginning, I've been trying to bridge the gap between the us versus them mentality when you're talking about citizen versus officer. And I think we really need to focus on that, put that message out there, and help people understand from the other side. So without further ado, I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and give you a little bit about his background and bring you up to speed on who he is as an officer and as a person. So go ahead, introduce yourself, Scott.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite to be here. So like you said, I've been in law enforcement for going on 23 years now. I've held many different positions in my agency, which includes training. And probably one of the more challenging aspects of my career has been in law enforcement training, because we have to cover a really wide gamut and subject matter. So that's been really challenging. So like you said, we met through jiu-jitsu about 2007-ish. And I remember our first conversation that we had. Actually, I was like, who is this dude sitting over here? Who's this guy think he is?
All right, let's hear it.
So
I think I remember it too, but I want to hear it from you.
You were, I can't remember who you were having a conversation with, but I was kind of in the area of it. And I remember you talking about wanting to go into law enforcement. And I remember you specifically bringing up going into federal law enforcement. And I think I interjected at that point, and I said, are you sure that's the route you want to go? Because I knew your background, and I knew I had a good idea at that point. We weren't really friends yet. We were more acquaintances, but I knew your background enough to go, you're not going to get what you want as soon as you think you're going to get. And so I remember having that conversation with you, and I was really trying to urge you to go local. I was actually trying to snipe you for my agency. But as the world turns, your path went your path, and here we are. So had a lot of challenges in law enforcement. I'm just happy to be here to talk about however this conversation goes today.
Yeah. And I think we could take this conversation 15 different ways, and it'll all be good information. I think right out of the gates, something that would be interesting to discuss is, we brought it up the other night, just talking amongst ourselves off air. We're like, what makes a good police officer?
Such a great question.
And it's one of those things. Immediately, as soon as you said that to me, I started thinking about, well, what do they want to see out of police officers? And if you look at any agency, if you go to their website and you say, hey, I want to get hired as a police officer, what do I need to do? And they all have a black and white standard on 37 push-ups, this fast of a 1.5 mile run, this fast of or this high of a shooting qual. Our written tests have to be 70% or above.
Right.
And you have all of these pass-fail events to qualify for the position. But at the end of the day, none of the requirements are judging the things like integrity, your ability to think quickly, your conflict resolution, your ability to balance the difference between the humanity aspect of the conflict that you're engaged in versus the legal aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's literally every single call.
Every single call.
And I've talked about it before on the show, is that officers have something called discretion. And what discretion means is I have to take all of the extenuating circumstances into account, and then I have to apply the law accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And two people may have committed two of the exact same crimes, but the extenuating circumstances could be very different.
Right.
And you're going to treat those people very differently.
I consider that when I'm considering like what am I going to do in this event? Because what we do, we do have major impacts on people's legal and financial obligations by the decisions that we make. And so when I hear you say that, it makes me think, number one, what is the metric? What's the measurement from a law enforcement agency? I really think this speaks a lot towards law enforcement leadership. But what is it that defines you as a good police officer? And I think historically, what we've looked at is statistics.
Mm-hmm.
You make X amount, you've issued X amount of traffic citations or infractions this month. You've made X number of arrests. You've served a number of search warrants, and that is people get rewarded in this profession for being very proactive. And I can tell you, I haven't always done this job the way that it should be done. Meaning
you were stat driven yourself.
Meaning I was
at
very
some point.
stat driven. Absolutely.
I think a lot of younger officers are stat driven. And by stats, that's what we call statistics, meaning exactly what Scott just said. The more arrests you have, the more traffic stops you have. It's like, look, I'm out working, and your superiors see that you're out working. Now, that's also not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. It can go that route if you start going down the path of arresting people with impunity, with no thought whatsoever towards the ramifications of what am I actually doing here with this person. And I can tell you, in full disclosure, that's the way I operated for a long time, with the lack of, I guess, the humanity aspect of this profession, not listening to someone's story or not even really caring about that. It was a stat, and I knew that would go on my record, for lack of better words, and it made me feel good because I was getting recognition and acknowledgement from my agency. But what I question myself on this is, what did that really do? Did that really have an impact on crime? Did that make me a better officer than, say, the other officer who is not making so many arrests or writing so many tickets, but they're engaging with the community?
Exactly.
And so who is actually more effective as a law enforcement officer?
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. On one hand, you have statistics that are measured and you can quantify. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, there's officers out there every hour of every day that are doing things that benefit their community, helping people.
Right.
Like, I can't tell you, because my jurisdiction included the airport. I can't tell you how many times I've helped people find lost luggage. I've helped people find like the transit centers or the train, or help them locate the cruise ship terminal, like all these things that are downtown Seattle,
right?
Where, I'm not being a badass out kicking doors and fighting crime, but you just brighten somebody's day.
Right. And there's no box to check for that.
Exactly.
And that is, in my perception, that's a problem in law enforcement. When we start getting so dependent on the stats and you lack the humanity aspect of things, then where are we really going?
But then the other side of this coin is, if there was a way to quantify that, like, oh, Officer Anderson just assisted so-and-so of doing this. Mm-hmm. And I can actually tell you, for my agency, they do have a call that they'll hit over the air called, "Hey, I'm on a citizen's assist." Mm-hmm. And that means exactly that. I'm assisting a citizen in whatever, a whole conglomerate of different activities, right?
Right.
And now you're taking something that's supposed to be out of the goodness of your heart, and what did you do? You just applied it to the stats.
Right.
Right?
It's the same.
So now you got people, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. You'll have somebody walk up to, I'll be standing there with one of my partners, and they'll be like, hey, excuse me, sir, do you know where the smoking area is at? Tom, too, I'm on a citizen's assist.
Right.
Yeah, the smoking area is 200 feet down at the end of the building there. You can see the big red sign. Yeah. All right, that's going to be clear.
Right. With no, like, engagement whatsoever.
No. So as soon as you do try and quantify something as simple as helping someone, now you've just pulled it into the realm of being just stat-driven bullshit.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And we got officers, and sorry if you're listening because you guys are my homies, but they get like, oh, they had 2,000 interactions this month.
Right. Boy, they're really killing it.
Yeah, they're killing it. And it's like, well, we all had that. I just didn't feel it necessary to tell planet Earth that I was telling someone where they can smoke a cigarette.
Right. Right. We have the same thing. I mean, I know that as a public assist. So whether or not you're stopping for that disabled motorist on the side of the road, or you see the poor dude doing the walk of shame down the side of I-5 carrying his gas container, and like, okay, dude just ran out of gas. Like, there is a safety aspect to it.
Of course.
All the cops out there know, like, anytime you go out with somebody, you need to put yourself on that.
Yep, because you never know where it's going to go.
You don't know, right? I mean, maybe that dude carrying that can of gas all of a sudden has different intentions than you thought, and he douses himself with it.
Uh-huh.
So it can go that way, but...
And I want people listening to understand, like, when you hear a cop say something like that, like, well, he might grab that can and douse himself with it. They're like, come on, that's ridiculous. No, anything that you can imagine takes place on the streets of Seattle.
It can and has.
I've talked to one female, this was downtown, and I went up and contacted her because other people like were concerned with her behavior. She's acting crazy,
Mm-hmm.
She pulls her pants down, takes a shit, and then reaches down and picks it up with her bare hands
Mm-hmm.
and shoves it back in her pockets.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the fuck do you want? What are you doing? Like, fuck you. I can go wherever I want. I was like, yeah, you're right. You can go wherever you want. I'm here because people are concerned. Okay. You're not in any trouble.
Right.
I'm not here to do you harm. I'm simply here because other people thought your behavior was bizarre and we're just doing a welfare check.
Yeah.
And that can go from a welfare check to wrestling some lady with feces all over her
Right.
in 2 seconds.
You bet.
And so, I mean, and that is, that's the hardest part of being a police officer, in my opinion, is that you're expected to wear 500 different hats for every single call.
And you're expected to do it quickly.
Yeah.
And 100% correctly.
And 9 times out of 10, you don't know what you're walking into.
No. So we get, we know that we get dispatched to calls a lot of times. Sometimes we'll on-view stuff, right? We're just rolling by it, or you just roll up onto something. But the calls that are dispatched, that come through dispatch, are rarely even remotely close to the information that you're getting over the radio. You have to make your own assessment. You just can't take that at face value that, hey, I'm getting dispatched to this suspicious person. You really have no idea what's going on. And so a lot of the times officers will have to change the disposition of the call as it came out because it's not anything close to what it was.
Well, and a big reasoning for that is because the dispatcher is relaying information from citizens.
Right.
And, there you go. Citizen calls in and says, blah, blah, blah. And 9 times out of 10, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
No, they don't. And it's not the citizen's fault. And
they don't understand the profession or the dynamics of these situations.
Right.
So it's, and then a lot of times they think that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So then they start giving information accordingly, thinking like they're going to be part of the investigation or whatever, And
the odd thing about that is they're looking at behavior that's an outlier, or it's an anomaly. It doesn't fit societal norm. It's bizarre, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so they're calling this in, and it's the officer's call to determine, like, it's odd behavior, yes, but is it criminal? And whatever it is that I'm observing might not be my idea of a Friday night, right? But
yeah.
but is it criminal? And that's a hard determination to make sometimes, and it's really frustrating for the citizen actually who's reporting that call.
It is
when they don't see a resolution to the issue, and a part of that is incumbent on the officer. When the officer doesn't follow up with the citizen and let them know the why, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know why, and when the citizen's left to guess, they're going to fill the gaps. And that gap very easily can be, well, the officer's not doing their job.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating on both sides.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point because you said the officer has to determine if it's criminal.
Mm-hmm.
If it is not criminal,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have what's called reasonable suspicion
Right.
to believe that whatever you are there observing or what took place
Mm-hmm.
was not a crime, you literally have zero tools to be able to investigate that other than what's called a social contact.
Correct.
And so if I show up to a call and I'm trying to put the pieces together and I'm not able to establish yet that something criminal took place, the person that's being accused can say, fuck you, I'm out of here.
Right.
And I just have to say goodbye, have a nice day.
Now, you're absolutely right. And it's what compounds that issue is for us here in Washington State. We also have the Washington State Constitution. Specifically, when we're talking about issues of search and seizure, we're talking about Article 1, Section 7, which is the counterpart to the Fourth Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
So states can be more restrictive on governmental action than the federal government. Right? They can do that. And in Washington, they do. And so what happens when we do that here is it gives the citizen more freedom.
Yep.
A lot more. And we love to give our citizens a lot of freedom in this state. But
we do.
It restricts law enforcement immensely.
Yeah. I've had friends that have transferred to Washington from Texas
Mm-hmm.
that are just blown away that we can't search vehicles.
Yeah. So case in point.
Yeah.
Right. And so case law has emerged. Like when I was first working the streets and patrol, we were able to search vehicles incident to arrest as far as what we called the lunge and grasp area. Right. We weren't still getting trunks without consent or anything like that or a search warrant. Now that's all gone. And so when I interact with students occasionally that come to Washington from out of state and speak with them about issues like this, they don't understand. Like, what do you mean you can't search vehicles? Or what do you mean, like, on what you were just talking about, a social contact?
Yeah.
Citizens not compelled to provide identification.
Well, and I wanted to circle back to the social contact thing because I had a case where I got a call and it was a lady reporting child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I saw her slap her daughter, blah, blah, blah. She was yelling at her.
Mm-hmm.
And in Washington State, you are allowed to slap your kids.
You can use parental discipline, physical discipline, up to a point.
Yep.
In Washington State.
And so for me to determine that it was past legal parental discipline, there has to be either some type of video surveillance footage or some type of injury on the kids, or I have to have different witness statements that are corroborating that it was beyond what is allowed under the law. And I didn't have any of that stuff.
Yeah. You have to have something at that point, at least to investigate
Yes.
under what we call Terry. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when I hear officers, sorry guys, but when I hear you say, well, I'm going to Terry somebody or I'm on a Terry stop.
Uh-huh.
What the officer really means is they're on an investigative detention.
Yeah.
Under the decision of Terry from 1968, Terry versus Ohio.
Yeah.
So you have to have something, right? So reasonable suspicion is a considerably less standard than probable cause, which is the standard of arrest in Washington State. But the ability to detain, say, that mother in that incident that you're talking about, you have to be able to reach reasonable suspicion. Can you get there? You can, but you have to have credible witnesses. Surveillance video is definitely helpful. So you have to have something. You just can't arbitrarily go up and seize that person.
Yeah. And see, and the mother was actually very willing to talk to me under a social contact,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I let her know, just so you know, like at this point in time, you are free to leave.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to stay here and talk to me. But people were concerned about your child. And this is what I would always tell people if it involves their child. I would say, hey, as a parent myself, if someone was concerned about my child's safety and called the police, I wouldn't be upset about that. I would actually be grateful about that because at the end of the day, they're perceiving something about the situation that is potentially putting your child in some type of harm, and they're concerned about it.
Right.
So don't be upset with them. Even if they misread the situation or they're out in left field, at the end of the day, they're concerned about your baby. And now we're having a conversation, making sure that your child is okay.
Right.
And so when I phrased it like that, she ended up talking to me. And after the investigation, I didn't have anything on her. And so as she walked away, now the reporting party was furious with me.
It circles right back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. She needs to go to jail. What are you doing? What are you doing? I said, well, what I'm doing is what I can do with the information that I have and the laws that I have to abide by.
Right.
And then that's how it ended. Her being furious with me.
Of course.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, the whole rabbit hole that we went down, all these different paths of how we conduct ourselves in law enforcement was stemming from what is a good law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think all of the things that make a good officer are the intangibles.
Right.
And so how do you measure intangibles?
Brother, I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that because I could probably retire and market it.
This is how I think you measure the intangibles. And I'm biased because I came from the special operations community. So I think selection processes and peering people is the best way to get high quality people. So you have all your standards. You have your shooting standard. You have your PT standard. You have your testing standard.
Yeah.
And they even make you go through like a psychological investigation and a lie detector to try and figure out who you are as a person a little bit.
They auger into you pretty good.
But at the end of the day, if you want to bullshit your way through that, a lot of people can.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of shitheads in law enforcement.
There's no doubt there are people out here right now wearing the badge that should not be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, but this is what I've always found interesting, and it was both with federal and with state law enforcement. The day I show up, day one at the academy, I'm hired. I'm protected by the union. I have this job. You have to fire me for something. You have to fire me for falling below the standards, not just, you know what, Greg, you're not a good fit.
Right.
Based on what people are saying about you, based on the observation of the cadre, we don't think you're a good fit for this job. We appreciate you coming. You're going to get paid for every day you were here. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
And that's out of the realm of, that's like, I'm a fucking wacko.
Right.
For thinking that that's how the law enforcement academy should be ran. But I think the academy should be a selection process. And I'm not saying that you can just can anybody at any moment for any reason. Like, it would have to be like a selection process where the cadre gets together and talks about each guy individually. Like in Delta selection, I don't even know if I should be talking about this on the air.
I don't know. Can we?
But I have some buddies.
Frightened.
I have some buddies that have ran that course, and that I'll leave it at that. I'll just say this is that every night the cadre sits down and talks about every candidate. That's it. And so what that does is if you have a member of your cadre that said, hey, candidate whoever kind of gave me some attitude yesterday. He rolled his eyes at me when I was trying to debrief him on something that he did. Okay, no big deal, right? And then the next day, you have that same thing. Oh, well, when I tried to correct him on this, he kind of acted like, what do I know?
Yeah.
And then you start to establish a pattern. And you as a cadre member working at like training people, you see that.
Absolutely.
You know who your shitheads are. And you know who your star players are.
Right.
But you as a trainer, you don't really have the ability to get rid of people, do you?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. And I think this is kind of heading down towards the path of law enforcement accountability as a whole. And are there barriers to that? Are there barriers up that allow unsatisfactory officers to stay on the job? I believe there are.
I think there's a ton.
I think some of those are exactly what you're talking about. Hiring standards,
Mm-hmm.
police officer associations. I've seen some pretty ridiculous fights mounted in defense of someone's actions that, and the fallback was always, well, we're defending process. We're defending the due process of the officer. But the action that was taken was perhaps unexcusable.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are roadblocks definitely in place in the system that prevent exactly what you're talking about law enforcement accountability.
It takes an act of God to fire an officer,
Mm-hmm.
unless he made a YouTube video.
Then you're
Yeah, then you're gone, dude. Get that guy out of here right now.
game over.
But dude, like, and when I say, like, you as a cadre member, you see what people are in their core. You see who they are. You see their abilities. You see their deficiencies.
We see them every day.
You see them every day. And when I say, hey, maybe that guy shouldn't be a cop,
Mm-hmm.
that's not even saying he's a shitty candidate,
Right.
or he's a bad person, or he's doing things that are malicious. Some people just don't have the resolve.
It could simply be this person at this time doesn't possess the tools
Yeah.
to successfully navigate not only the academy, but just social interaction.
I know officers that don't like to talk to people.
I do too.
And I'm thinking 12 hours a day, your job is interacting with people.
Yeah, you talk to people.
That's
every
what you
day.
do. So anybody listening that wants to be a cop, 99% of your job is interacting with other human beings, period.
Absolutely.
And it can be during traffic stops. It can be, like we were talking about earlier, just assisting people throughout their day with the most random things.
Mm-hmm.
It can be trying to investigate a crime, but very rarely are you just standing there twiddling your thumbs.
Right.
You're talking to people. And so if you don't have the ability to just basic communication skills, I mean, I work with officers that literally my 8-year-old is better at conversating. And it's bizarre because it's like, why is this a profession? You should be an accountant or something.
Yeah, do something different.
And that's not even me trying to be like disparaging. Like, this person doesn't like social interaction with people. And here he is,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's so many things that have to change before the cops on the street are kind of the people that I feel like guys like you and I have an expectation of as law enforcement officers.
Right.
I mean, the other thing that's absolutely mind-boggling to me is there's the standard to get hired, and then there's no more standard.
That's it.
You can fail every PT test for the next 20 years. You can become morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
You can gain 55 pounds of fat,
A lot do.
and your 2-mile run can go from 14 minutes to 35 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not going to take the run because I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and that goes into a whole nother category.
Oh, we have officers in my department. I mean, I know it's different agency to agency. The physical fitness test is optional. And so they try and incentivize it.
Right.
Like, we'll give you a 1% raise if you pass your PT test, which to me, I mean, 1%, that's $1,000 a year
Mm-hmm. It's something.
to go for a run and do some push-ups. And I'm going to fucking do that anyways.
Right.
So
that's because that's how you're wired anyways.
yeah, but on a Thursday morning at 8 a.m., if you want a 1% raise, come run a 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. I used to joke. I used to say, I'll do it every single morning for a 1% raise.
Right.
Like, hey, count me in. Anderson's here for his
Here we
1.5
go.
run. There's guys that don't do it.
Yeah.
And so if you're intimidated of a 1.5 mile run, this isn't your profession, man.
Yeah. And then you might run into the argument from an association that, well, now you're forcing an officer to, it's not fair, right? Because now you're forcing an officer to have to do something that they're not technically required to do. And you're incentivizing it, and So now it's somehow not fair.
Life's not fair.
Correct.
You want to know what's not fair is if I'm in a foot pursuit of a man with a gun, and then when I catch the guy, I have to deal with them by myself because the other 3 guys fell out.
Right.
Because they're more concerned about eating Doritos and watching movies all the time instead of taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And this profession, I mean, you worked the street for the majority of your career, and you worked in an area where you got in a lot of shit, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to rely on your backup to be doing the right thing.
Right.
I mean, every cop has a story of where they got in a fight.
Yeah.
And they tune the dude up. And then after you get him in cuffs, you look up and your partner's doing what?
Standing there.
Standing there watching.
Yeah.
And immediately you're like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, this happened to work out this time, but that's not how we do business, because next time the guy might reach in his pocket and pull a knife out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's certain expectations that one patrol officer should be able to have with another patrol officer,
Right.
regardless if I've ever worked with him a day in my life. Like, if a county guy is way out and who knows where,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets into some shit, and then a city guy from another department responds,
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to have expectations
Right.
on that guy as the capabilities that he brings to the fight.
I'm on the 3rd floor of this apartment complex. I need you to be able to get up those flights of stairs and come help me out, whether or not, whatever it is, whether or not it's a use of force incident or not. Maybe we're rendering medical first aid to somebody, and I need you up there.
Yep.
And to have you pass out on the second platform isn't satisfactory at all.
So for me to have, or not even me, for an agency to have a physical fitness standard that is a maintained expectation of your employment, like, how can you tell me in order to be a cop with this agency, you have to be able to do 40 push-ups and you have to be able to run this far? How can they say that in one breath and then with the next say, well, once you're on, it doesn't matter. It's not
Yeah.
important to maintain.
Right. What is that?
So what is the standard saying?
What's that signaling to the officer from your leadership
Yep.
or from the organization? It's that really that's not important.
And then even more important than what is required or what is not required from your agency, as an individual, just like you said, you might have to sprint up 3 flights of stairs
Mm-hmm.
and carry a baby somewhere,
Right.
you know, and with all your kit
Yeah.
and just, it's not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, it's actually
It's
in
quite
the realm
probable.
of probability that you're going to have to be exerting yourself physically.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you do that to yourself?
It's a great question.
You know, it's mind boggling that this profession has almost painted itself in a corner where the unions and the rights of the officers and all of these policies that are in place, initially they were probably set up to attempt to protect the officer
Mm-hmm.
from wrongful termination or supervisors that have a hard on for like getting rid of someone they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
But it's went full circle now, and now it's just disallowed the profession to seek out and maintain good, strong varsity players.
There's another specter in this conversation right now.
Hit me.
I'll tell you what it is. It's complacency.
Mm-hmm.
99 times I've made that traffic stop and nothing's happened. As far as maybe I got some, belligerence, but nobody tried to kill me. Right.
Yep.
And you get lulled into that sense of that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like this stop's going to be okay. Or I've been to this dude's house. I was just here last week and he was cool. I know it came out as a DV call or domestic violence call. Last time it was fine. As a matter of fact, the last 5 times it's been fine. He's gone to jail or she's gone to jail or what have you, or maybe nobody went to jail, but nobody died until that one time. And so the complacency aspect is huge because if you think about the sheer number of hundreds of thousands of law enforcement interactions with the public per year, and the number of use of force incidents. And let's just say deadly force. The numbers are that those are extremely rare.
Yes.
Those are extremely rare occurrences. Now, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination we should not train for low frequency, high liability.
Yeah.
So firearms, defensive tactics, evoc, or driving, right? Absolutely, we should train for those. Here's where we fall down, I think, is high frequency, low to mid liability areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so the complacency issue for me is pretty telling, because I can tell you from experience myself, I've greatly underestimated situations in the past. I've made a lot of tactical errors. Now, working in the agency I have, in my patrol career, I tended to be more rural, very rural, instead of urban.
Mm-hmm.
And you're out there. And do you need to push this issue right now? And I think a lot of younger officers, not all of them, but I think a lot of them have this kind of this expectation that they need to maybe push pace. And that's why I stand on this, I bang this drum every day, bro.
Instead of saving it for another day.
Yeah, another day, another way. It might just be very tactically sound.
Yeah.
For you not to push this issue right now and create something that didn't have to go this route.
Well, that's your ego.
Oh my God.
That's what it is.
What?
Yeah, that's your ego. You know, if you can just say,
that's nonsense.
But the complacency thing, and I talk about the complacency thing a lot because it's very applicable both in military, contracting, law enforcement. Like they'll say, have your head on a swivel and make sure that you're always adhering to your SOPs. There's a reason those are in place and all these things, right? But the reality of it is when you go day in and day out, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months. And like you said, I've talked to this guy every day, or he's always been cool. And so there's a dichotomy because on one hand, you do need to be switched on. You need to be ready for what comes your way. Mm-hmm. But then you don't have to be feeling every second of every day that you're 2 seconds away from a gunfight.
Right.
Like, I won't do this because, you know, like I've mentioned it before on this show. I know a guy that says he won't use a urinal. That's giving your backup.
Right.
You give your backup, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so this is kind of my answer to that. And it ties it all together is through training, through physical fitness, through martial arts, hand-to-hand, through firearms training. Mm-hmm. What you do is you build your capabilities to a level to where if things do pop off and go bad, I can revert back to that and I can be ready to go in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying don't be switched on and don't have your head on a swivel and don't clear your corners and all the stuff that you are taught tactically. But what I'm saying is if you do find yourself in a more relaxed state just because of the reality of being on patrol. Right. Like, or you might even be backed in somewhere having your lunch, like your guards let down a little bit, boom, something pops off. Mm-hmm. Your training and your physical fitness are what is going to carry you through that moment.
To me, that's confidence.
Yeah.
That's absolute confidence. And when you can walk confidently in this job, it just looks different.
It does.
You can literally see multiple officers in an encounter, and one will get picked on. And because why? Yeah. Because they sniff it out, bro.
Yeah.
They sniff out the lack of confidence, and they know that they can go ahead and start targeting this officer.
And dude, that's just human dynamics.
True.
You know?
Yeah, humanity doesn't stop at the door of law enforcement.
Right? I always joke with my wife. I'm like, when is the day going to happen where I get fucking mugged? Like I see this shit online all the time, or like guys getting pulled out of their car and beaten, or guys at the fucking supermarket getting fucking slapped and shit. And it's like,
I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but
no, but
I laugh at the prospect of that happening to you because the likelihood of that is slim to none.
It's because the monkey brain doesn't want combat. The monkey brain wants to bully and me, and take what I want and make me feel good. It doesn't want combat.
No.
And so all the people that are out there victimizing people or picking on people, just like you said, they're watching, they target,
Yeah.
and it's probably even on a subconscious level.
Path of least resistance.
And they take the path of least resistance. And like you said, the same thing's applicable to cops.
Absolutely, it is. It cuts both ways.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about this is that I think there's a big misconception that the more highly trained you are, like the better shooter I am, the better fighter I am, that it's more likely that you're going to fuck somebody up on the street.
Mm-mm.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
No, absolutely.
With that confidence in your own abilities and your training comes the biggest de-escalation tool in your toolbox.
Absolutely. Right? Legally speaking, you could perform this certain task on this person in this given time right now. When you have that confidence level, you know that you don't always have to take that route. Right? And so that goes to a just huge topic again for me is not only the confidence level, but just controlling pace. And you can tell someone it's like in the animal kingdom, man. You can tell who's who in the zoo.
Yeah.
The lion's the lion for a reason.
Yep.
Right. And so you can see that in how people present. It's just this confidence level. You're confident in your abilities. You're confident in your communication skills. And you're confident in all the other skills you need to be trained in law enforcement, right? Just because you're a great shooter or a great tactician, that's awesome, man. But that's just like one dimension of you as a law enforcement officer. You can be great that way, but you can absolutely suck at communication.
And when you say like you're figuring out who's who in the zoo and who's the lions and who's the sheep, like that entire hierarchy is established on the other side too.
Absolutely.
Within the criminal element. I would say it's even established more so.
Oh.
On the criminal element.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've seen is the guys that are the lions on the other side of the coin, like gangbangers and like the dudes that I was arresting when I was in Los Angeles, when they see you as a lion as well, I don't even want to say they're fearful of you. They respect you.
There is a weird dichotomy, I guess, for lack of better words, that exists when that recognizes each other.
Yeah.
And you're on two separate sides of the fence.
But there's mutual respect.
There absolutely can.
And hey, and I'm taking you to jail because of X, Y, and Z, but it's all good.
Right.
I've joked, I've said this before on here, is that some of the best conversations of my life are dudes in the back of my car that I'm taking to jail. Yeah.
I had an incredible conversation that was actually pretty, it's one of those conversations that you have with somebody that is like a life-changing conversation. You want to hear it?
Yeah, hell yeah, I want to hear it.
So
so do the other 37 subscribers of my podcast.
All 37 of you. Awesome. No, I was working a assignment that we used to call ProAct. And you weren't responsible necessarily. I mean, sometimes you did break off from your missions or whatever you had, or your details, maybe is a better word, to go back 911 calls. But primarily that wasn't your jam, right? Your responsibility, my responsibility was to, it was really broken windows policing. What it was is like
elaborate on that.
Okay, broken windows policing, like high levels of so like higher crime levels, and you just flood that with law enforcement. And then the question is, why are those in those particular areas? Why is the crime so high? And that can take this conversation a completely different, a different path. But what I'm trying to say is, this woman that I had this conversation with, I was in this assignment and I was wreaking havoc constantly. Tons of arrests, lots of search warrants, booting doors for dope, nonstop, right? And so this is a street arrest. This is how this first evolved. And so I contact this woman, and it turns out she is a methamphetamine addict.
Shocking.
Shocker, right? But when I say that, what's the image that jumps into your head when I say methamphetamine addict?
Oh, missing teeth,
Okay.
super skinny.
Okay.
talking to you like, fuck you, what did I do? I didn't do anything, like twitching and like all the telltale signs of a meth head.
This woman, 180 degrees opposite of that.
Okay.
This is soccer mom USA, right? And so I'm like, this isn't congruent with my experience. Like, what are you doing on meth? And she goes, I feel like I can meet all of my family's expectations when I'm on this drug. I can do the laundry. I can get the kids where they need to go on time. Actually, probably quite early. She can have dinner on the table, right? She's a stay-at-home mom. And that's a full-time gig right there, right? And so she had felt all these expectations from just life in general that her husband had, that her family, that her kids had. And she felt like she could keep up. And it got out of control. And here she is now getting contacted on the street, selling low levels of dope to sustain her habit. It wasn't for anything like monetary, really. She was pretty low feeder level, right? Not huge. But it was telling to me, it taught me a massive lesson. Like, she's not a bad person, bro.
Yeah.
She's holding it down, right? Just the way she's going about that, not the best way to go about that, right?
Well, it's an interesting statement because the libertarian in me says like, hey, all drugs should be legal. What I want to put in my body for my personal reasons is between me and my family, not the United States government.
Gotcha.
And so when I hear a story like that, hey, you want to use methamphetamine because it makes you better at doing the laundry? Start snorting away. You know what I mean? But the second that your habit causes you to smash a window out and take change out of my cup holder,
right?
Hammer that motherfucker.
And when it turns to like harming others and like wreaking havoc on property, because man, some of these locations, like you and I both know, right? These a den of iniquity, right? So there's like dope breeds everything.
Yes, it does.
So when you get that prototypical dope house, when I hear a cop talk about a dope house, first I want to know how you know that's a dope house. How can you quantify that for me? Because I didn't always do that. I just looked at it on face value and went, oh, there's a broken down cars. There's multiple structures on the property. People short stay foot traffic. People in and out. All telltale signs of. But when an officer tells me, hey, I'm working this drug house, and I hear that, especially out of a brand new officer, I'm like, number one, what's your knowledge base to make that determination right now? That doesn't necessarily mean it's a drug house, right? But those locations, once you do determine that's what's going on there, it breeds all sorts of just nonsense, right?
Of course it does. So prostitution. They're pimping hoes.
Yep. They're stealing cars. Yep. They're stealing your mail. They're They're doing that. They're washing checks. They're doing all sorts of stuff out of there. And it can. I mean, I've had homes where homicides have occurred out of homes like that, and you're just like, oh my God, this is so far out of control. And I've seen literally families being held hostage by another family member, meaning not like literally like holding a gun to their head, something like that. But they've literally come in and they've taken over the entire residence.
Yeah.
And now
and sometimes grandma's in there.
Absolutely. Grandma's in there. And now grandson is in here with 10 of his unsavory people who are like-minded. And it's just, she's just getting run over. And she literally feels like she has no recourse.
And for people that have never been in houses like that, I'm not exaggerating. Like, I've seen beds in dope houses. I wouldn't crawl in that bed and sleep in it for one night for $50,000. You know?
Well,
unless I could put a hazmat suit on, you know? Like, literally, like needles and blood stains buckets of shit.
It's
and
pretty scandalous.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
The human beings will live in those environments.
I know. And then, so with that, some people are going to absolutely disagree with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it, is does repeated arrest over and over and over again make that problem go away?
The answer is no.
It doesn't.
And if people want to disagree with that, they can fuck themselves. I mean, bro, just that dude that I broke his orbital, did I show you the picture of that guy?
Yeah,
so he was stealing a car. He rammed a pregnant lady. He rammed my partner out of the way.
Other officers.
Yeah, another officer. And for lack of a better term, I fucked that dude up. Because he was homicidal. He was going to run somebody over.
Right. But when you say that, like, here's what I think the public doesn't understand about where they don't have the education level. So when you say, I fucked that dude up.
I'm not a cop anymore, so I can phrase it like that.
No, but because I know what happened with that situation. Obviously I wasn't there, but you told me about it, right?
Yeah.
That may be very objectively reasonable action
of course.
at that time.
Yep.
Right. And so your force looks different on that incident, but it still falls under the realm of objective reasonableness.
Of course.
Right. So
and that's why my use of force was deemed within policy. But my point of bringing that story up is, come to find out, that guy got in a fight with 7 cops the night before.
Yeah.
The night before.
Yeah.
And King County prosecutors, in their infinite wisdom, said, "Hey, we're going to kick him, and then we'll file charges."
And so here's the kicker with that. As far as the use of force goes for the officer, if the officer doesn't possess that knowledge or know that,
which I did not,
which you didn't,
yeah,
that plays not into your propriety for your force level.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So what you determine
the facts
after
known
the
at
fact,
the time.
Yep, doesn't matter. Completely irrelevant, bro.
Yep. And so, not only did that guy fight cops the night before, then he got high on PCP, which I didn't even know PCP still existed. But the toxicology, and again, another factor that I was not aware of at the time.
I mean, for me, running into PCP in my career, I can't really say I've ever run into that. Meth, coke, heroin, pills.
Dude. So the toxicology report came back PCP. But here's the kicker. After we arrested him and charged him with like 3 or 4 different felonies, they kicked him that night too.
Yeah.
So the prosecutor wrote me an email and apologized. They're like, "Yeah, we probably shouldn't have kicked him." But it circles back to what you're saying is, does arresting a guy over and over and over and over and over do anything?
Right.
No, especially not in King County, Washington, and Seattle, because every guy that gets arrested for any type of theft or drug charge or even like low-level assaults, like, they're out that day, no matter what, dude. And I don't know if it's the same up north in Snohomish.
So I wouldn't say it's dissimilar, but what does that do to the officer's like psyche?
Well, I'll tell you what it does to the officer's psyche, because it did it to my psyche. Like, we're out on the streets, and this is coming from a guy that enjoys fighting, right? So it's like, I've
been subjected to your knee ride, sir. I know that all too well.
So I was put in a situation where I possess the tools to resolve what's in front of me, right? And I incapacitated him, and he was taken into custody.
Right.
But even me, like, even someone that knows how to fight and even enjoys fighting, you're putting me at unnecessary risk, because you're putting these expectations on us to go out there and resolve these violent situations. And at the end of the day, like, I like fighting up here. And for you guys just listening, again, we're in my jiu-jitsu academy. We're in a large mat room, and the majority of my fighting happens right here. That's what I enjoy.
Yeah.
You take that out on the streets, I don't know if I'm going to get stuck with a needle. I don't know if he's going to pull a weapon out. Like, I got a family to come home to.
Right.
And so when you put your physical body in harm's way in order to subdue some fucking psychopath, and then your county prosecutor says, "Thanks for playing, but we're gonna kick him." That happened 2 days in a row with this guy.
Yeah.
The feeling that I have, and the feeling that lots of officers share, is like, well, why am I gonna fucking do it then?
Yeah, and absolutely, the things you're talking about, extremely valid, right?
Yeah.
But just in general, that can drive a depolicing of society where cops just aren't going to engage.
Exactly right.
I did all this work, and I did the right thing for the right reasons, because I try to advocate that as every time I get in front of a student officer or brand new officer or any officer, right, for that matter, in training, but do the right thing for the right reason. And it's really hard to stand on that when those type of results happen.
Bro, the email that comes from King County prosecution is, I mean, you see it with almost every one of your cases. It's like,
do they call it a decline notice?
Yes.
Right.
Officer Anderson, thank you for filing charges against so-and-so for X, Y, and Z.
Right.
We appreciate your investigation, but unfortunately, due to our caseload and the facts and circumstances around this case, we are going to decline prosecution at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it even says, please don't allow this to like dissuade you from filing future cases with King County prosecution. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, when that happens over and over and over and over, and bro, I was at the port, and for those of you that are listening, the Port of Seattle is a very low key agency when it comes to like dealing with day-to-day petty crime. Like it's not like the county guys. Like a county guy probably makes an arrest every shift, maybe. And it's hard
that's not unrealistic.
Yeah, exactly. If you're making an arrest every shift at the port, that's mind-boggling.
You're like an outlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of months.
Sure.
A month to go by that I wouldn't make an arrest.
Sure.
And so, you know, because I don't like other cops listening. What the fuck does he know? He works at the port. Well, what I can tell you is I know I work at the port, and I understand that it was a lot more low key than what most patrol level officers were doing.
Sure.
Like I'm humble enough to admit that I've done a lot of badass shit in my life.
Yeah. You don't need to.
The port wasn't one of them. I like the port.
Yeah.
But what we did day to day, like I said, a lot of it was assisting people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going after criminals. And that's just based on my jurisdiction. We had zero residential jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. That in itself takes the level of...
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, way down.
Way down.
But regardless, when every case that you submit and every case your partners submit, you get the decline notice, it's just, you start to ask yourself, well, why are we doing this then?
Yeah.
Like Seattle has... When I was working in Seattle, 3 grams of heroin or less, good to go. Don't arrest them on it. It's personal use.
Yeah.
I heard it's up to 9 now.
Yeah, that's a number that I'm not familiar with. I've heard 3.
It was
I've heard 5. But 9. I mean, we're at what point or what are we doing here?
Yeah, and for anybody that's thinking, well, Greg just said he's a libertarian and people should be able to put in their body what they want to.
Yeah, right.
I do think that. But all you have to do is walk the street of Seattle for 3 minutes and realize that the heroin that's in those people's pocket isn't something that they're just using for personal use and not affecting the surrounding city. The city is absolutely rotting from the inside out. I've seen the decline of Seattle in 3-year period. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And it is 100% because of people that are addicted to heroin and methamphetamine. 100%.
My hat is off to the SPD men and women out there. I spent
the half of them that are still employed.
True. I mean, that's a whole nother.
Oh, we'll go into that next.
Can of worms. But I spent a significant amount of time last October at the King County Courthouse on a case I can't really go into, but 3 weeks of my time was spent down there, and every day walking from the same parking garage to the front doors of King County, and I always knew there was going to be an adventure, right? Within like 5 blocks, something was going to kick off, and that was, you know, whether it was aid units running amok down there, or police running code, or 2 dudes fighting on the side of the street. Somebody defecating, or, you know, whatever. There was always going to be something. And the law enforcement that I grew up in and patrolled in, again, very rural, very different
Yeah.
experience from that. I mean, there's sections of the agency I work in which are more city. It would be like working probably more in a larger city, but there's a large component of that that's extremely rural law enforcement, and you just didn't see it on that level. And so you hear about it, and you think you get it, but you don't get it until you actually brush face to face with it, and it's incredible.
I'm not exaggerating when I would say 90% of the things that I dealt with as a police officer that were like that there was a criminal element going on, right? Like I'm investigating a crime or I'm dealing with something that's related to a criminal act. 90% plus was because of heroin and methamphetamine. Almost every single thing, because from drug addiction comes thefts, comes trespasses, comes like all the things that you deal with as a patrol level officer. And I mean, the city council in Seattle has absolutely, and the mayor have absolutely ruined the city in a 3-year time period. It's bizarre. It's so bizarre that you almost want to, and I mean, we don't need to go down any conspiracy theories right now, but you have to ask yourself, is this fucking calculated? Are they doing it on purpose? Like, why would the city council say anywhere in Seattle is people are allowed to have a residence set up there? You can set up a tent right in front of the front door of a business and you can shit there and you can piss there. And now that person, his customers can't even walk through the door anymore.
Yeah.
And when they call the cops and say, hey, can you deal with this? The cops say, no, city council said that people can set up residence anywhere in the city.
Well, not only that, but it goes back to the cycle we're talking about. The officer perhaps they've developed probable cause to make an arrest. They do, they book them in jail. They're back.
And they're back out.
On the same day.
Yeah.
And so that's just not a world that I am familiar with in law enforcement for the most part. I will say this.
Lucky you.
Right. I worked homicide for a better portion of my career. It was about 8 years, so the better part of a decade. And I had a great working relationship with the men and women who were the prosecuting attorneys in that unit. I mean, it was a really good kind of symbiotic relationship. And that's
for obvious reasons, because you were going after the worst of the worst.
Killers.
And when you put together your investigation, then you developed your probable cause and you put the case together. Hell yeah. Let's go after them. Right. You know, they don't have that kind of motivation for lower level crimes. So what do you do with it? What's the real answer to that?
What is that? Because on one side of the coin, you'll hear this argument. You can't arrest your way out of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? Does that mean JDPs or jail diversion programs where you're pushing people to treatment options, or drug courts even, where people are not going through your typical court system? They're going through a drug court or a mental health court. All of these are options that I think the intent is try to get to the root cause of what's the real problem driving this.
Well, and there's a lot of people that are pushing for exactly that, like rehabilitation centers.
Right.
And dude, most cops are compassionate people, contrary to popular belief. They would love to see people get help and get off the streets.
It's an amazing resource for an officer to be able to, I'm having this interaction with this person. They're in crisis. And that could be because it's drug induced or not, or both, or off of meds or whatever. And this person's in crisis, but it's not criminal.
Yeah.
Per se yet, right? So then it falls under the community caretaking function. So what are you supposed to do with this person? Even if, let's say, there is low-level crime involved. So like when I say low-level, like a trespass, right? So taking that is putting that person in jail for the night a viable remedy. Sometimes if that person is going to continue to drain law enforcement resources for the rest of that shift, right? Away from people who legitimately need, not that this person doesn't legitimately need help, but you're taking resources off the street repeatedly. Is that sometimes a Band-Aid remedy? Yes.
Yes, it is.
I take that person to jail. I know at least for the next 8 hours, I'm not going to be dealing with that issue right now.
Uh-huh.
But what is that
You ever
really
see the same person
done?
twice on one shift?
I don't recall.
Okay. Yeah.
But like within days,
Yeah.
for sure. I've heard the stories about people. Now, where I have seen that happen is not a booking, but where you've brought somebody to what's called a DMHP, a designated mental health professional. And law enforcement officers in Washington State have the authority to do that under RCW 7105.
The ITA?
The Involuntary Treatment Act, right? And so if certain criteria is met.
Yeah, they have to be a danger to themselves
or others or
property.
property, right?
Yep.
Or gravely disabled. So the officers made that determination. They take them to where they're supposed to go. And they bring them to a DMHP and they're kicked out hours later.
Well, and as soon as you were talking about the revolving door of the jails, I was going to bring up ITA because there is and that again, that's the Involuntary Treatment Act. We do have tools to get people off the streets if they are, like you said, it's low level crime or it's mental health related and there's no criminal activity. But even that, from what I've seen, is also a revolving door.
Yeah.
And they're in and they're out. They go to the hospital, they're seen by a professional, and every once in a while you'll get a subpoena. Hey, you need to go to mental health court to testify because they want to keep this person. And you're like, oh, they're actually keeping someone. But it's the exception. It's not the rule. And keeping someone due to a mental health crisis versus getting these people that are addicted to drugs in some type of treatment, two very different things, I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like the amount of money and resources that the city of Seattle must use hourly to combat the shit everywhere, the garbage everywhere, the police making arrests over and over and over and over. I mean, I have a buddy that's a firefighter. All of their calls are going to drug addicts that are fighting with each other, drug addicts that are ODing, drug addicts that just cut themselves open, smashing into a car. Like literally, it's the same as law enforcement now. Hour to hour, every single hour of his shift, dealing with methamphetamine addicts downtown Seattle.
Yeah.
And so the amount of money and time and resources that are already going into these people is vast. So how difficult would it be to be like, hey, we're going to build a fucking 40,000 square foot facility.
Right.
And if you're arrested 3 times on a drug related charge, you are now going to go through you could do something like you could make them sign up for it on their own. You could say, hey, in lieu of being criminally prosecuted, you are going to volunteer to a 90-day inpatient program. We're going to have professionals get you off the drugs and then also point your life in a positive direction and give you, one tool for when you get out of this facility to try and move your life in a positive direction.
Some would say with heroin, I mean, you have to project out for recovery.
What do you mean by that?
2-year plan,
Okay.
5-year plan to get out.
Like all inpatient or a combination of both?
Probably a combination of both with medicated assisted recovery. Some people, some locations do, provide, they assist with medication in people's recovery. Because the expectation, I think, is unrealistic for us to say, I'm going to throw you in jail for tonight and you're going to clean up.
You're going to detox.
And you're going to come out. You're going to detox and, okay, now there starts your new life. That's bullshit. That's completely unrealistic. They're going to go right back. They're going to go right back where they came from. Why? Because they don't have the resources, right? I believe that. So something like you're talking about is not a foreign concept up in the area that I work in, right? And so something that was started up here is something along the lines of more like your one-stop shop. There's a certain amount of beds. It's not a crazy amount of beds, but it's a place for someone to land, right? And it's kind of a soft spot for you to land for a minute, right? And detox, have access to resources right now. Optometry,
doctor, all of that is right there for this person. So, or these people, right? And so I just look at jails and prisons since the going away of mental health facilities, like let's just say asylums.
And that was what, late 80s or something?
It might have even been earlier than that.
Wasn't it the Reagan administration?
I don't know for sure, but I do know that those facilities have been used as makeshift mental health facilities. And is that the right place for this person right now? Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe if you're violent and you're, you have a propensity towards violence, or, you're going to harm children or anything like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I'm an advocate. You're going to jail. Right. But this lower level misdemeanor crimes, and not to say that this isn't frustrating for the public, right? Because the public's the one who's getting their window busted and their change taken out of their car. Absolutely very frustrating.
I told a story on this podcast last week of methamphetamine addicts stealing a bunch of stuff off my boat.
Right.
You're familiar with this story,
very.
Right? And when I talked about that, I wanted people to understand, like, this isn't the exception. It's not like, oh, Greg got hit. Wow, what a shocker. It's like, yeah, of course he did. His boat was in his yard.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, a lot of people are like, yeah, that's not surprising.
Right.
And so
I'm not aware of the community that's immune from violence.
Yeah.
Or, this, because let's face it, heroin, meth even, right? Coke, it spans a wide range of humanity. It's not always the street person who's out there shuffling around.
No, it's
right?
not.
It affects everybody.
Well, and I always talk to people about how, like, people think that I only see one side of the coin because as a cop, I'm dealing with people that are already so far down that path that now they're living under an overpass in Seattle,
right?
Shitting in their pocket, right?
Yeah.
But like you and I, one of our old training partners, smart kid, brown belt in jiu-jitsu, fun guy to be around, hung around him all the time.
Yeah.
Hurt his back landscaping.
I know exactly where we're going.
Yeah. Hurt his back landscaping, and boom, hardcore heroin addict.
Yeah.
Because once he was out of his prescription, he didn't have options anymore.
Yeah.
And you hear that story all the time.
Absolutely. All the time. Now,
good people.
Is he a criminal?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Right?
No, he's not.
He's not a criminal.
But his behavior started to become criminal.
Right.
Right? And I don't know how far it went, but it did become like, hey man, I can't pay for my cell phone this month. Can you loan me $50?
I remember getting hit up.
I'll get you back on payday next week, and then you never hear from him again.
Right.
And that's how we all put it together, because our circle of friends realized, oh, he asked you? Oh, he just asked me for his cell phone bill.
I think that was actually both of us.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, dude, there's a problem.
Oh, boy.
And then sure as shit, come to find out, hardcore heroin addict, because he got addicted to opioids because of the pharmaceutical companies pumping those things out into everybody. Again, whole nother podcast, right?
Right.
But I tell that story because it's like, listen, I realize that some of the people that are out on the streets doing this crazy shit were just like you said. Maybe they were that soccer mom who needed to get her laundry done.
Yeah.
Maybe they were my jiu-jitsu training partner that hurt his back landscaping. And some people don't have the ability, when they start spiraling down that fucking path of addiction, they don't have that ability to step back and be like, hey, I got to fucking police myself. I got to fucking cut this out.
It goes moment to moment.
Yeah. And it's, like, I don't know what percentage of that is physical versus like a mental thing.
Yeah. I don't know either.
But at the end of the day, a lot of people are incapable of stopping that train once it's started. And I just think there has to be better ways for us to spend our resources to help people like that.
And to say that arresting that person is going to be their wake-up call is not realistic.
No.
Sometimes it is.
As I say, maybe.
Sometimes it is, but that's few and far between, where someone is finally like, okay, I've hit rock bottom. I'm sitting here in the county. I'm sitting here up in county again. I got to make a change, man. Like, that's pretty rare.
Uh-huh.
Where arrest drives that decision.
I mean, I'm sure there's data out there on this somewhere, and I bet it's almost non-existent. You know,
I bet
it's almost non-existent.
Yeah, I would disagree.
Because going into, and not only do they not get the help and the treatment that they need, but fuck, dude, doing time, that's not a good place to be.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like, people come out worse off more often than not, you know, because it's a fucking survival. It's survival in there.
Mm-hmm.
You got to align with the right people, and you got to fucking behave a certain way. And then you get out after living like that for however long you lived like that. And I've talked to guys when I was in the federal system, they're like, like I said, real conversations in the back of my fucking car, taking them to jail. They're like, dude, I'm not fucking making excuses. Like, I fucked up, take me in. But he's like, dude, once you're a felon, good luck trying to get your life together. No one wants you for an employee. It's on your record. Everybody fucking can find out what you did and who you are. And like it's hard to fucking put that lifestyle behind you once you're just immersed in it.
Right.
You know? Yeah, fuck, dude. I don't know. There's so much that goes into this. There's so many different layers. But I'm not hearing, and I'm not saying like guys like us have the answers, but guess what we do have? The humility to sit here and talk about it, say what we can do as cops
Right.
may benefit people, what we've done as cops that was actually harmful to people.
Right.
And just have an honest conversation. No one's having honest conversations.
No, well, nobody's, yeah,
And
that's not happening.
At a political level. You know, do you see our city council having like, hey, if I was on the city council, I would be having town hall discussions. I want to pick everybody's brain.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're a business owner and you have people living in tents and pissing on your fucking front porch, what do you need to see? What makes sense to you? Like, there's so many bright minds out there, and all you have is these city council members in Seattle that just perpetuate the bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I'm to a point where I've never been a fucking tinfoil hat wearer. But you have to wonder, like, is this calculated at this point? Doesn't make any sense to me, man.
Yeah. I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Because we're not the sharpest tools in the shed. And I think we're coming up with some decent ideas.
I think we're having exactly what you are talking about is open dialogue here, because you and I certainly, there's things that you and I don't agree on, right? And we can have that conversation, and nobody's getting pissed at each other. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but there's got to be common sense approach to law enforcement. You can't swing it just, one way or the other. There's got to be a sweet spot somewhere in the middle that it's not just arrest, which does, a lot of times does nothing.
Yeah.
And versus, there's no accountability and everybody's getting a free pass, and that's not cool either.
Yeah, that's not going to work either. No, and it takes us full circle to like where we're at today. Because like when I made my video May 5th, the whole reason that I made that is because I felt like the profession of law enforcement is going to be dragged through the mud. I feel like most people, if you ask them like on a one-to-one like conversation, hey, what do you think of cops? I think most people would be like, yeah, I think cops are necessary. I think most of them are probably good people. Like, we weren't in a time where the overwhelming majority of people shared the fuck the police mentality, right? And in a 6-month period, we've seen that turn 180 degrees. And dude, it started with the whole COVID thing and cops doing things that I perceived as like immoral and unethical and even illegal. And then the George Floyd thing happened, and then the BLM protest, and on and on and on and on and on. And now we're at a current state where people don't even want police departments anymore, which is asinine.
So, so a very edgy comedian, right? Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
So, he put out a Did you see this? It was called 846.
Yep, I watched it.
Okay. 846 was right on the heels of George Floyd. And in his dialogue that he was having, he said a lot of things that made sense to me. And one of the things that he said was this: the streets are speaking right now. The community is speaking, right? And so it makes me think like, well, who is it that I actually work for, right? As a police officer, I'm a public servant. And I work for the community, right? We should be in and amongst, integrated within the community. And to hear that, it baffles my mind for me to hear the arguments that I hear made about, well, why the violence? Like, why are people so angry? Bro, you don't have to turn the clock back very far in law enforcement history to see that we have a very stained and problematic past in the administration of justice and decisions that are made. And so I don't think we don't have to scratch our heads too hard to figure out why people are so angry and pissed. When you see something like George Floyd in that video dash cam or whatever that was, that footage that we saw, and watching that happen just absolutely blew my mind. Like, there is no law enforcement use of force expert anywhere out there that I've heard made a cogent argument that any part of that was reasonable. I looked at that and went, that's a criminal act right there.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think it's also important to say, I mean, you as in the profession and I was in the profession, every single cop that I know agreed with you.
Absolutely.
Every single one. Like, there's always cops that are like, you didn't see the video, what happened before the video started.
Right. The video doesn't tell the whole story.
And I get that.
Right.
And guess what? 20 more minutes of video came out and it didn't tell the whole story. But the story still remains. Once he was cuffed and you're kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that's not how we do business. Period.
At all.
Period.
No. And there's not one officer that I spoke to that thought that even raised a argument that was reasonable. And so now we get these things that explode, right? And then we wonder why people are so pissed.
Yes and no, though, man, because like I understand why people are so pissed when it comes to Derek Chauvin's actions, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think it's unreasonable for people to paint the profession with a broad brush because one cocksucker went out there and behaved like that.
So check this out. I get that argument, bro. I appreciate and respect that argument. Check this out. What happened when a Starbucks employee did something, asked 3 police officers, I believe it was in Arizona, said, "You're making customers uncomfortable because you're here, you need to leave." What happened?
It's funny you say that because what happened was cops across America and everyone was just like,
boycott Starbucks.
Oh
man.
My God. Oh my, they can't. And you know what I said, dude? And dig through my Facebook because it was like 4 years ago.
I did
something.
The same thing, brother.
And I said, hey, guess what? Private business.
Okay. Right.
If private business doesn't want your gun in their business, cop or not a cop.
Right.
Go to fucking Dunkin' Donuts to get your coffee. Don't cry about it.
So, right. Just stop. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's where my brain went was, that's not fair.
To
get painted. Are we now just painting somebody from one interaction that occurred? Are we now vilifying a whole entire organization?
Yeah. And
so when I throw that out back to officers, they're like, well, I go, does that happen to you? Does what somebody does, they make a poor choice in New York, let's say, for example, does that impact you here in Washington State?
Well, it certainly can.
It can. It does
Yeah.
often, right? You get painted with a broad
Especially
brush.
in today's world where, I mean, dude, I watched a video this morning, and I think we already talked about 7 patrol cars rolling up to a CrossFit gym
Mm-hmm.
and taking the owner out in handcuffs
Mm-hmm.
For
We
not-
did talk about that.
for not following the mask mandate.
Yeah.
Okay. Which just infuriates me. And we can go into that separately after the fact. But my point was, before I even knew which county and which state it was taking place in,
Mm-hmm.
my initial reaction was, fucking cops are doing it again.
Mm.
The cops are doing it again, dude. They're blindly following the orders of their mayors and their governors, and they're trampling on people's rights.
Mm.
And so when you watch something with your own eyes, even though it's through a screen and it's through an Instagram feed, you're seeing behavior happening in what feels like real time, even though it's probably 3 hours ago.
Right.
And now you have an emotional response to it, and you're going to attach that emotional response to the profession that you're watching trample on people's rights.
Yeah.
So no, it's a good conversation because it actually makes a perfect sense, because for all the people that were already distrustful of police officers
Right.
that were watching Derek Chauvin do that,
Yeah.
that's the emotion that they felt. I get it, dude.
Powerful.
Yeah. And it's easy. I mean, dude, I've only been out of law enforcement since, what was it, August 7th? And I'm already finding myself saying, fuck the police again on certain things.
On certain things.
Because it's like, and bro, I get it better than anyone that most cops are good people.
Mm-hmm.
And half of my peer group are law enforcement officers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not saying defund the police or any of that stuff. I think that's silly and out of the realm of reasonableness. But at the same time, you see enough stuff, you find yourself getting fired up enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get where people are at.
where people are going
Mhm.
with it. Yeah.
And again, dude, it almost feels calculated. It almost feels calculated. And I'm not saying that so you agree with me and get pulled into my tinfoil hat conspiracies. But bro, like, I feel like people are getting pitted against law enforcement. And until the officers are willing to stand up and say, hey, we're not going to be put in the middle of all this shit.
Mm-hmm.
We're done. And it can't come from patrol level officers,
Oh.
i.e. Officer Anderson, because
Right.
guess what happens? Thanks for playing. They
Right.
snuff you out. A chief of police needs to stand up and say that
Leadership.
publicly and be like, hey, we are more than willing to assist in educating the public. We are more than willing to assist in disseminating your orders and your recommendations and all this stuff, but we can't be put in the middle and be used as enforcement to people. Dude, this guy got arrested for fucking working out without a mask on.
Mm.
Come on, dude.
Right.
You know? And I don't know how far you want to go down this rabbit hole on this podcast, but like, I just see this ending bad. If it
Yeah.
continues, it has to end bad, you know, because we're sitting in a CrossFit gym right now.
Right.
And I can tell you, if 7 cop cars come here and try and shut me down, like I saw this morning, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that problem's going to go, but there's going to be a problem.
Where?
So what do we do?
Well, so my question is how do we unify? How do we unite on this issue? All of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there such a seemingly divide right now between what's going on? Because you and I were just talking about this. Can't remember if this was this morning or yesterday. We were talking about 9/11. And I remember working the streets during 9/11. And when that happened, it didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter where you were from. People united with that. I remember driving home and watching people wave the flags, and they had candlelight vigils out there and loving cops.
Yeah.
And waving, and I was just like, wow. I mean, I felt really proud to be part of this honorable profession, right? And
Yeah, you get that feeling like it's stirring emotions inside of you.
absolutely,
You know?
very powerful.
Well, I mean, I think the only way for people to unite is perspective. you have to be able to see, okay, what's going on here isn't great. There's some flaws in the system. There's some things that need to change. There's some people that need to be pushed out. And we can go on and on and on about what could be done to benefit, just for instance, what we're talking about, the profession of law enforcement. But all the people that are so mad about so many things, a healthy dose of perspective might change that. You know, like you have food.
Right.
When you go riot and smash the windows out of a Nike store, the police just show up and they're not shooting you. Like, go try that and fucking, I don't know, name any, but insert 35 different countries right here. Go do that and see what happens.
There have been incidents where that has occurred in law enforcement.
What do you mean, where like looters are getting shot?
Yeah. Look at the back of the civil rights movement, right? And when you have peaceful protesters, right? And I know that's a kind of a hot button for people to talk about. But when you have that and you have law enforcement turning dogs and hoses on people, and that's not that far removed from the generation we're in. We've inherited issues like that in law enforcement where now we're interacting with the children from that era.
Okay. So true, right?
Right.
I can agree with that statement. But I'll also say, just because something happened to someone at some point in time doesn't allow you to stand 2 inches from a cop's face and yell, "Fuck you, pig. Fuck you, pig," like we're seeing on TV every single day. They're lining up. They're throwing things at cops.
Right.
They're swearing at them. They're getting in their face. They're smashing their cars. Like, in my opinion, this stems from a culture of no consequences. They've grown up in a culture with no consequences. And I'm not going to use the analogy everybody gets a trophy because that's overplayed.
That's way overplayed.
Way overplayed. I've had it with that. You won't hear that on this show. But
you know what else I'm done with? These are unprecedented times. I'm done with that too.
Yeah, because there's probably, I mean, I just read that book that Rogan recommended on the Native Americans on the Plain tribes.
Oh.
Those were unprecedented times.
Whoa.
You want to talk about violence and killing and chaos and madness. Like, so yeah, times have been worse, right?
Yeah.
I get it. But at the same time, it wasn't that long ago. Like when we were kids, if someone talks shit to you,
yeah,
we're fighting behind the church.
Yeah.
After school.
Yeah.
That's normal.
And there was no, you hear this a lot. Well, back in my day, we handled things with these.
Yeah.
There was no weapons involved and none of that. And yeah, I grew up in the same town you did, bro.
But my point, then my point of bringing that up is if you disrespect people, you talk shit to people, and not only like other kids, but parents too. Like I wasn't fucking with my dad. I fucked with my dad one time when I was 16 because I thought I was ready, and I found out I wasn't ready. And he didn't even hurt me. He just pinned me against the wall by my neck.
Bro, I think
picked my feet off the ground.
I think I had the pleasure of meeting your father when I was around 40 years old, maybe like 39, and I didn't want to fuck with him.
Yeah, dude, nobody did. Nobody did. But my point is, it's like there's something good that comes along with a healthy dose of fear. Right? And fear and respect can very often go hand in hand. And I don't want people to fear the police in their community.
Yeah, bro.
Right?
When you say that, something jumps right into my head that wasn't an uncommon thing in patrol. You've probably had this happen to you too, where a parent brings a child, relatively small child, to you, the officer, and says, "Hey, I want you to scare the shit out of Johnny."
I've heard that. I never experienced it firsthand.
No, I can't do that, sir. Because here's why. It's exactly what you're talking about right now. I want that kid, that child, to be able to come to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I'm not going to drive fear. I'm not going to do that for you. If you want me to have a conversation with your child about police or safety or just being a good human being, right? We can do that.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to do that, but I'm not going to frighten your child. That's insanity.
Yeah, I think it is too. But I will say, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old man, like that during that transition,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have walked up to a cop and said, "Fuck you, faggot," like just starts talking crazy shit to him. I wouldn't have done that because, well, for a lot of reasons, but for one reason that stands out is that there's going to be repercussions.
Oh boy, you're going to get in some trouble.
Yeah, and if I'm not ready for those repercussions, I'm probably not going to go down that path and start talking shit to somebody. And I feel like we're at a time where repercussions are a thing of the past. Like, and this is what I think. And I know I'm fucking out in left field and I'm a wacko, right? But all these people that are just trampling through the streets and smashing everything and tearing down monuments, and the cops have been told to go hands off, right? Well, like, you get a pass if you have a BLM flag, but if you're just working out with a mask off, let's go arrest that guy. And the most interesting thing in the video that I watched this morning, the guy said to the cops that are arresting him, he goes, "We're out here doing squats and power cleans, so you're taking me to jail. If we were out here holding Black Lives Matter signs without mask on, you wouldn't fucking touch us." And guess what? That's accurate. Jay Inslee, in his infinite wisdom, which is just fucking ridiculous, dude. And sorry, this is me speaking, not Scott, okay? But he's like, we did studies that found that the protests didn't contribute to COVID. What? Okay, so 10,000 people fucking getting together, nut to butt, shoulder to shoulder, didn't contribute to COVID.
Yeah.
But my gym can't be open yet with more than 5 people in it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
I can definitely see your side.
And so,
not that I wholeheartedly disagree with that, and just something I'm hanging up on, with something that we were just talking about was, okay, so I'm probably more left leaning than your average law enforcement officer. If I had to put myself somewhere politically, I'm more centralist and probably more left.
Nonsense.
And so, when I see and hear about monuments being taken down and destroyed and things like that, I go back to the head scratching of why people are so angry. We have a history in America and in law enforcement in particular of disparate issues of enforcement, law enforcement. And we can even go back to Jim Crow laws, and we can go back to the black codes and things like that that came out of slavery, right? And and so I'm not some woke dude. I'm just a guy, right? But I've done a lot of research and study, and I have a lot of very dear friends and close friends, and you do too, right? That are African American, that have experiences in this day and age still with issues with law enforcement and enforcing the law. And so I really struggle with the not understanding why people are so angry and why they're pissed and why, certain things are happening. Why is this Wendy's on fire? Well, I'm not condoning violence by any stretch of the imagination, but
you're saying you can connect the dots.
I feel I can. I feel I absolutely can through history of law enforcement. And I don't
But this would be my rebuttal to that is there's a lot of things that are pissing me off right now.
Sure.
As a societal on a societal level across a wide spectrum of things, there's a lot of things that are really pissing me off right now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't fucking burned down any buildings yet.
Yeah.
I haven't shot anybody yet. Like, just because you're upset about something, if the platform that you think that you're going to create is going to be created through violence, then get ready for violence. And that's where I'm at on this stuff, because the police have had their hands tied. And it's like, listen, to not take away from everything that you just said about people that do feel that they've been victimized, and there's been like, just there's been a disproportionate amount of effort like put into enforcing the laws on certain communities or certain races, like all of these things that are potentially getting people upset, then create a platform and figure out a way to implement change. But if you think you're going to change something by burning down our neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
and we all know that they're burning down, a lot of those people are burning down their own neighborhoods. A lot of the properties that were burned are owned by African-American business owners, right? If you think that that's the way to do it, if you think violence is the way to push your message, then I'm to the point where, well, I'll show you what violence is.
What do we do then with, maybe we can divide this into traditional theory versus critical theory. And when traditional theory, like what you just said, when people devise a platform and you get a voice and you use that, right, to push dialogue and unification and change. But when that doesn't work, time and time again.
At what point?
At what point
Do you go to violence?
At what point do people lose it?
Yeah. I mean, that's where we're at, right? But I can't help but think, like, if you want to lose, like, quote unquote, lose it, right? If you want to implement change through your violence, then implement change through your violence. Like, dude, I fucking dig that, to tell you the truth. There's a big part of me that gets it.
Mm.
There's a big part of me like, dude, I'm to a point where I'm starting to think about, I think violence might be the option to deal with some of the things that we're seeing happening in our streets, right? But if I'm going to use violence as a tool to push my agenda and push my message, I'm doing that understanding
that there's ramifications to that.
There's ramifications to this. And I'm going to put my body armor on and grab my fucking new 308 Wilson combat rifle. And I'm going into this with a combat mindset. I don't think we have anybody that's pushing an agenda with a combat mindset right now. I think we have people that are that are capitalizing on convenience, emotions, putting themselves first, not the community. I mean, you can't tell me that looting a store and stealing a bunch of stuff is rooted in any type of goals for societal change. Because what that tells me is your brain is like reverting back to just your animal brain. Me. Give me. Right? And they're fucking just going in stores and they're stealing a bunch of shit. They're not doing that because they want to see change. They're doing that because they're a bunch of young idealistic kids that are just outraged and they want to just wreak havoc on the communities.
And I don't know about you, but when I see that, it's not just one demographic.
Oh no,
that's doing that.
No, and I actually had one of my best friends was on riot patrol downtown Seattle.
Yeah,
and dude, his words, not mine. He goes, "Bro, it was the most diverse rioting and looting
I remember you saying that
I've ever seen in my life." He's like, "There's black, whites, Mexicans, Asians." He goes, "I saw everybody fucking shit up, throwing bricks, throwing firebombs," and so that's what leads me to believe it is more like an idealistic thing, as opposed to a group of people that want actual change in policy and change in how our law enforcement officers operate.
So how do we drive that without it getting to the point of urban warfare?
Bro, I'm to the point where I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can because, and again, every time you turn on your Instagram feed, you're being fed media that intrigues you. Like the algorithm is going to push
what your interests are.
and then you're going to, additionally, you follow certain people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But every time I look at my Instagram lately, I'm seeing dudes getting yarded out of cars. Like I saw one today where a dude got kicked in the back of the head. And as the dude's kicking him, he's screaming Black Lives Matter and he's kicking him in the back of the head. And it's like, okay, you're not pushing your agenda forward. What you're doing is making guys like me and all of my fucking special operations veterans homies, and I have thousands of them, and I'm here to tell you, we all share this. The police aren't going to defend the cities anymore. That's starting to become apparent. So at what point in time do patriots defend the cities?
Where is that tipping point?
Where's the tipping point? And it's there. The American spirit of defiance has been in existence since the beginning of time. You know, all we had to do was pay a tax to the King of England, and he would allow America to have autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck your tax. You know what I'm saying, dude?
Well, I believe we talked about this today, and those may have been the very words from Sam Adams. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had that posture.
Yeah. And a lot of the people, you know, it's funny because the forefathers that stood up against tyranny are now regarded as heroes. And I guarantee you that there was a big portion of society that's like, hey, just pay the tax. Let's just keep it. Let's just keep things smooth.
Just keep it status quo, man.
Hey,
don't rock the boat.
Hey, it's all good, right? No, fuck you. It's not all good because I'm not fucking bending a knee to anybody. That's what our country was founded on, right? And so now, I think there's a war on two fronts. I think we have a big portion of our society that has become so self-serving that they'll just fucking loot and steal. They don't give a shit about any type of progress, societal progress. All they care about is what is for them in the moment. So that's one front that we're going to be having to confront at some point in time. The other front that we will be confronting at some point in time is the corruption within politics. And I mean, if you would have asked me about this a year or two ago, I would have been like, dude, relax, man. It's all good, you know? But now we have the vice president candidate saying she's going to implement a mandatory gun buyback of assault rifles. What do you think that means for our future?
Well, I think you and I both came to that conclusion yesterday. What does that mean? Does that mean confiscation?
Well, mandatory buyback is a sugar-coated way of saying confiscation. They're going to give you, how much money are they going to give you? You know what I mean? Oh, I got fucking 20 AR-15s.
Right.
One of them is worth $10,000 alone. Okay.
I'm going to hazard a guess. You'll probably not get that on resale.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But guess what else they're not going to get? One of my fucking guns. Right. And I'm not afraid to talk about this on the air.
Right.
Because when the day comes where they're knocking on your door, because she even said, Kamala Harris even said, we will utilize law enforcement for people that refuse to partake in the mandatory buyback program. Bro, what does that mean? And again, dude, this isn't a tinfoil hat thing. This is the vice presidential candidate stating this publicly. Yeah. So what does that mean for the future of our country? Because there's a lot of people that are like, oh, from these cold dead hands and like,
right.
You know, I support 2A.
And when they say that, some of those people will be the first motherfuckers to turn a gun over.
Turning their shit in.
Here you go.
Just fucking bitch made. Here you go. I'm sorry. But bro,
there's others that are not.
This is not tough guy talk. This is everything that I've dedicated my life to as an adult has been about fighting tyranny. And I've been all over the world doing it. And now, after spending fucking 10 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, the tyranny's upon us. And I don't feel like InfoWars fucking whack job saying this stuff because they're being open about it. We're going to take your guns away.
Yeah.
So what do we do, dude? And I feel like it's just one more step where law enforcement is going to be pitted against the people.
So I think we were talking about this the other day is what's your legacy going to be, right? So let's say it does go that way. And the next thing you know, you're surrounded by a SWAT team outside and things get really bad. And what was your message? Was it received, or are you going to go down in history as
the wacko
who went off the grid and ended up getting shot and killed by law enforcement, or charged with a plethora of felony crime, right? What is that going to do? I don't know.
Well, I think that what I would hope is that if one person finally stands up and said, hey, not me, not today, fuck you, that message is going to be received by patriots across the country, and it's going to ignite like wildfire. And everybody is going to give that big collective fuck you to the government.
It could go that way.
Because here's the thing that I talked about it in the video that created what we're doing right now, right? The government has the misconception that they hold the power. They do not hold the power. The people hold the power. And we allow them to have this perception that they hold the power. And eventually there's going to be a tipping point where we snatch that back and say, have you lost your fucking minds? And that day is coming. And me and Toby talked about it on the last podcast. If you think for 1 second that a bunch of hooligans running around with AK-47s and a desire to win is an easy fight.
Oh my gosh.
Guess what? You've never been in that fight.
That made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I heard that. Here's what I guess I fear is it could go that way. Your message could be received and it could kick off something, right? Then I think about the public, and I don't say this to like be insensitive to ADHD or anything like that, but the public is very ADD when it comes to seeing events unfold on the media, right? Oh, today it's big news. Tomorrow,
it's flavor.
Nobody cares.
Flavor of the week, man.
Nobody cares. There was no message, right? So what is going to drive effective change?
I mean, I think it's going to take, the catalyst will have to be something absolutely just asinine, i.e. taking our guns away. I think that message would not be received by enough people that now it's go time. Because what's happening in our country, it's the frog in the cooker, right? And you throw them in and the water's room temperature and the frog is good to go.
Good to go.
He's like, it's just swimming around. Turn the heat up a little bit.
Just a little by little.
Oh, it's just warm now. Like this. Hey, this actually feels kind of good, right? And our society went through a phase where, hey, this feels good. They're turning the heat up, but you know what? Like the economy's good and my fucking interest rate on my house is low and my kids got pretty good health insurance. Everything's good, right? And then they turn the heat up a little more. And now people are like kind of raising their eyebrows. Like some people are just starting to feel the heat, but they're not really connecting the dots. And then other people are like, oh, hold on a second. What's going on here? And when they crank it all the way up and the water starts to boil, some people are just going to get cooked. And then other people are going to crawl out and that's going to ignite their warrior spirit. And maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part, but I can tell you, like I talked to my friend in Ellensburg last week. I told you about his well, right?
You did.
Okay, so I'm going to share this. My friend owns his property in Ellensburg, Washington. He has an artesian well that produces more water than he knows what to do with. And the county officials came in and they metered everybody's wells. They metered them. and they said the county owns the water because it comes from the water table. And that's below your property.
Yeah.
It's not your property.
So it belongs to the county.
It belongs to the county. And you're only allowed to use this many gallons per day. And now if you go over that, we're billing you.
And didn't
Bro, I'm telling you right now, fucking crazy Greg, I have a well on my property. You come on my fucking property and you tell me how many gallons that I can use out of my own well, or you're going to start taking my money, it's on. Get the fuck out of here. It's on.
Didn't you also tell me that there is an amount of like runoff from the well?
Yeah.
That's
so
unregulated.
Yeah, I want people to hear that. Yeah. He has an overflow valve and he says water is seeping out of the overflow valve all fucking day.
But that's not getting regulated.
No. Because you can't control that, right? That's just the artesian well producing. What you can meter is what goes from the well to the house.
To the home.
And maybe I'm fucking crazy again, but how does the government get to charge me for my own water? And that's just one little thing, right?
Right.
And the building that we're sitting in right now, I built from the ground up. I dug the foundation, poured the cement. Yeah, you were here through all that process, right? And I'll do a separate podcast on it because I don't have 2 more hours to talk about this. The county nickel and dime me everywhere. Mm-hmm. They made this project almost impossible. They were extorting money from me because they're like, oh, this guy's building a gym. He must be rich. Watch this. And they did a lot of things to me. And I straight up told them, this is what you're doing right now is extortion. Okay. I work as a federal agent. I sit in court all the time. I work with the FBI. This is extortion. And just because your title is whatever management from Snohomish County doesn't change the facts. What you're doing is illegal. And as soon as I said that, well, we'll waive all these fees for you. And in my opinion, that's admitting guilt.
Weird.
Yeah. Shocking, you know? And so everybody's been fed up for a long time. I mean, my dad was fed up as far back as I can remember. And that's why I kind of detached myself from politics, is because I watched my dad die, an angry old man, because he was so fed up with what he was seeing happen to his country. But then you got to ask yourself, at what point do I have to become involved? Because I can tell you right now, sitting here right now, I sat and watched Seattle get destroyed on my television screen from the comfort of my home. And I'll tell you, it makes me feel like a coward. Straight up, dude. I think the reasonable thing to do would have been to get 10 of your buddies to go down there and dump those motherfuckers, dude. That's what I think. And that might sound unreasonable, but if you want to destroy my city and burn it to the ground, then what you're telling me is you're ready to engage in combat. And guess what? None of those people are ready for combat.
Right.
They're only violent when it's one way. When violence goes 2 ways, when the fucking range becomes a 360-degree shooting range, we'll see who's ready to be violent at that point. And I bet it's going to be a fucking overwhelming small percentage of them. Dude, I'm getting kind of fired up here.
You're getting all fired up.
It's good though. It's a conversation that a lot of people are having. And I had like hundreds and hundreds of comments on one of my posts the other day of people that are like, we're fed up. Say the word. We're ready to take our country back. It's not just these fucking obscure groups of people having conversations somewhere. Yeah. People are fed up, man. And to tie it all back into law enforcement is law enforcement's going to be on the front lines.
Right.
They're going to be the ones that are going to supposedly bridge that gap between the governmental orders and enforcing it on the streets.
Yeah.
So what do they do, man? What do they do?
It's a good question.
Because I can tell you, I would have thought no cops would side with the government when they're asking you to do unreasonable things. And now we're seeing it every single day.
Yeah. Well, when it comes down to your
mortgage
and putting food on the table and clothes on backs, it's a little bit different story.
It is. It's a lot of bit different story.
And a lot of guys I know, guys and gals in law enforcement that have been in for a significant amount of time, myself included, you have a niche, right? You feel like I can do this really good. I can perform this job really well. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of other things I can do. I don't feel like I have a wide skill set, right? To go out into.
Most cops feel like they can do nothing else.
Right.
And
they
I
feel
don't,
stuck.
and I don't say that to paint cops out in like a bad light. I say that because so many of my friends that are cops right now want to get out of the profession. They're like, it's not what it used to be. I'm sick of everybody looking at me sideways. I'm sick of putting the uniform on and risking my fucking safety day in and day out to just be portrayed as a complete worthless piece of shit. And they want out,
but they can't.
But they can't, you know? They can't because, I mean, let's face it, carrying a gun is kind of exclusive.
How marketable are you?
Yeah, you're not marketable. You know, Toby talked about that on the last podcast. He's like, I got out of the, I did 10 years in different special operations communities from Rangers to CIA and whatever. He got out and realized I have no marketable skill set. I literally have to start from the ground up, and he became an electrician.
My dad told me the same thing. My dad served in the U.S. Army in the Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something to me, because I was one of those kids, like, when I was 18, 17, I was a fringe kid, man. I could have gone either side. And
I think that's a lot of people in the
right.
community.
And my dad, I remember him saying something to the effect of the military and marketability for someone who can run an M60 or a weapon in society. It's pretty small. So go get educated. Go do, not that the military people are not educated. I don't mean it that way. But he said, go a different route, right? And so I can't say that's what I listened to. I kind of was like,
yeah, what does dad know?
Yeah, he doesn't know shit, right? Well, then I sent him a picture because he retired, and he's actually retired twice because he retired the first time and it drove him nuts. He couldn't sit still. He's that era of dude, right, where he's in his 70s, man, and this dude is still gnarly. And I sent him a picture because I became a rifle and pistol instructor, and I sent him a picture of me working on the range and some of my equipment. And I said, sorry, Dad. I didn't go the military route, but I still ended up.
I still carried a weapon.
Wearing a gun for a living, right? And so I think we both got a good chuckle out of that. But cops feel stuck in what they can do. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do within law enforcement, right? But to be able to break out, a lot of guys and gals that I know who've actually retired and have said, man, this is a huge world out here. There's a lot more to life than law enforcement. There's a lot of things you can do out here. I know people who've retired and have gone on to be security directors for firms like Amtrak and have gone to be investigators at Boeing or Starbucks or so it's few and far between. It's not as easy as you might think in law enforcement to go, well, I can do a lot of things. I was a homicide detective. That doesn't necessarily mean I can go out into the community and go be a CEO of an organization or anything like that either. So
yeah,
all this to say is I think cops feel like they get stuck, especially when you get a certain amount of tenure in. You get 10 years deep, 12 years deep, and you're like,
yeah,
I don't know where to go.
And it also doesn't make sense to go somewhere else because
you got to start all over.
Financially, this is the path that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, regardless of what makes sense financially or what makes sense to pad your retirement or to, help you get that good medical retirement, all the stuff that comes with giving a career to the state or to the feds, you can't allow that to persuade you to act in a way that is illegal, immoral, or unethical. You can't do it. You can't do it. And so, a lot of people do say, hey, you hear the phrase going around, hey, they're just doing what they're ordered or they're doing what they're told. That's a slippery slope. Another phrase that I hate that I just used.
Slippery slope.
Slippery slope. Because what it is, when you say it's a slippery slope, it's almost like you're condoning a little bit. You're like, well, right now it's not a big deal, but it's going to become a big deal.
It's like,
The second you do that, it's a big fucking deal.
so I'm going to make you and your family a batch of cookies
Mhm.
tonight. I'm only going to put a little bit of dog shit in it.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's all good, right? That slope that we're talking about, it's not always necessarily this steep angle alpine slope.
Yeah.
It is subtle.
Yeah.
It
It
can
can be
be-
fucking a 2% incline.
And
like,
then all of a sudden you've compromised yourself and you're in deep. And you're looking at yourself like going, how did I get here?
exactly.
Right.
And we're going to have a guest shortly that found himself somewhere
Yes,
by getting caught up in that slippery slope.
absolutely.
Right? So it happens.
It does.
But I think it's just imperative, and I've talked about this before, for cops right now. When you get off duty tonight, go look at yourself in the mirror and say, who am I as a man or as a woman? Where are my lines in the sand? What am I willing to do and what am I willing not to do?
Mm.
If I'm asked to arrest the lady at the park because the governor said she can't be there, am I willing to do that? Yes or no?
Mhm.
If I'm asked to take somebody's guns away because they refuse mandatory buyback, am I willing to do that? Yes or no?
Mm.
And speak that truth into your reality. Like, go through that in your mind and ask yourself, am I going to be one of the cops that stands with the government? And I'm not fucking making the decision for you. Maybe you think guns shouldn't be in the hands of citizens,
Right.
Right? If that's your belief, am I going to be a cop that stands with the government, or am I going to be a cop that stands with the people? And for me, that decision was overwhelmingly easy. I'm
Mhm.
standing with the people. And I'm not only standing with them, I want to lead the fucking charge with them,
Mm.
right?
Right.
But what you don't want to do as an officer is wait for you to get dispatched. We got a registered firearm owner that refused buyback at 83rd Southeast, blah, 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 blah. Tom, too, can you take that? You know what I mean? Like,
you don't want
Roger
to
en
make
route.
that decision right.
No,
That's
dude.
Then, right?
That is not when you come to terms with who you are and what you stand on things.
that I think that's a really wide reaching concept in law enforcement.
I
To
think
me,
so, too.
That speaks of pace control and controlling the speed of an encounter, right?
Yep.
So when I tell new officers control the pace, and I'm talking about you're using things like hard cover and distance, and you're using things like your perception to pick up on nonverbal behavior. Is there valuable info in what I'm watching take place right now, and can that drive a better plan, an approach plan? Because what I say is it goes back to exactly what you just said. I don't want to make that choice when I've now run up and I am hip deep in alligators.
Yeah.
And now I'm fumbling for a resolution. Because now I've compressed time. I've compressed distance. My threat perception has increased. My ability to respond with a reasonable force option has decreased. And I drove that.
Yep.
I created that action by violating pace. And so I think that speaks directly back to what you just said, was you don't want to be in that position where now you're, and I mean, sometimes you are. You don't always have the luxury of time in law enforcement.
Nope.
You have to make critical decisions, and the Supreme Court recognized that. Even they did. They said, we recognize that law enforcement oftentimes have to make decisions that are in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. Certainly, that's not every encounter. Actually, those are rather rare
Yeah.
in law enforcement.
But they're the ones that are going to get the most
play,
armchair quarterback,
right?
you know?
You're going to get the most media play. Again, high liability, low occurrence, low frequency.
Yeah.
But when you get violations of pace, I personally watch this when we watch. You probably do the same thing. You watch incidents across the nation, right, and where things have gone sideways. Who's pushing the pace, and do I have to right now?
do I have to go right now? It may be very tactically unsound and unwise to go right now, right?
Bro, I mean, I see it, and you see it clearer than I do because you understand this stuff at a higher level. But I see it all the time where I see cops that get hemmed up in something, and now they're plastered all over the media. And it's not even necessarily that they did anything illegal or immoral or unethical, but they didn't utilize.
It was unwitting.
Yeah, they didn't utilize the tools that they had available to prevent it from happening.
They
in the first
knew
place.
not how to handle that another way.
Yep. And again, like it goes back to in the military, we call it wargaming.
Yeah, I call it crisis rehearsal.
Okay.
Some people call it the what if game.
Yeah, I guess in law enforcement you can't say wargaming.
That's really not all that PC.
Yeah, the crisis rehearsal, wargaming, like, and I was using that in a very dramatic example of gun confiscation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can apply that every single aspect of how you do your job as a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
You know,
So
to the most petty crimes, to a tyrannical government telling you to stand against your people, and everything in between.
Yeah.
You know?
So one of my trainers, when I was a brand new officer, was my second phase trainer. And we did this all the time. And we would be driving along and he would say things like this to me. What direction of travel are you heading? What 100 block are you in? What's the next major intersection coming up? Did you see the color of the car that just passed you? How many occupants were there? Did you see the kid at the bus stop on the south side of the street? Did he look comfortable with that adult there? And then he would do things like this. That bank on the corner just got robbed. Now, don't you dare turn on your sirens and start busting intersections. But I want you to show me where you're going to set up. Where are you going to set up in the parking lot? Where are you going to set containment cars? What are the verbal instructions going to be when we make the call into the bank? How's that going to look? What if it's verified good bank robbery, suspect, matches suspect description, comes out, sees you, turns to go back in? We would do that constantly. And I've heard this, and I don't know, right? I'm not a neurosurgeon. I don't know,
Dr. Wells.
Yeah, Dr. Wells. That's not my title. But I've heard this, is your brain doesn't know any different. If you've been there in your brain, in your mind, you've actually been there.
Yeah.
And so
I've heard that as well.
I've heard that a lot. And
well, I always say that when I'm talking about fighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if me and you put mouthpieces in and put 4-ounce gloves on and say, let's do a round, you're one of my best friends in the world. But if you get on top of me and you're punching me,
yeah,
my brain goes into lizard mode and is like, okay, so I'm in a fight.
The last time we did that, I received a golf ball sized hematoma on my shin.
That probably means you checked the leg kick.
No, I also think I heard the distinct sound of what sounded like a baseball bat upside my left temple. So,
but no, my point is like, the body can go where the mind's been before and be more comfortable there. It's the same thing that you're saying. Like, okay, the bank wasn't getting robbed.
No.
Just like you and I aren't in a real fight.
Right.
But the brain somehow is able to almost trick itself that, okay, I've been here before.
And I think it's even been referred to as like you're carving pathways in somehow you're at least developing a plan. Like, I've been here before. Right, because certainly you can't forecast. It's not possible every call that you will experience as a law enforcement officer.
No, of course not. But and one thing that one of my friends always says, he's like, exactly what you just said. You can't always forecast every call, but one thing that you do want to forecast is you winning.
Right.
That's huge. Like when you think about scenarios and you visualize different outcomes. Mm-hmm. That your visualization shouldn't be you laying in a ditch bleeding out of the back of your head.
That's not an acceptable answer, right?
Yeah. So, well, shit, man, we just burned through 2 hours and 15 minutes like nothing.
Dude, that doesn't even feel like that was 2 hours and 15 minutes.
I know, and we could go for another 7, but I think it probably makes sense to save it for another time.
Makes sense.
There's so much going on with the profession right now that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about. And I think that it's good for cops, like yourself and former cops like me to call dudes out on the profession. I think that's a big key, and because we're talking about keys of moving forward, I think that's one of the biggest keys is when guys that are part of the community see things that make you raise your eyebrow and just they don't pass the sniff test. Change comes from within.
Look what happened with George Floyd. We have these other officers standing around not doing anything. They're not intervening in this behavior.
No. Nope.
That's not happening. And the accountability factor and checking each other, right?
And that's the fastest way to correct errors in law enforcement. And like, I know Andy Stump talked about it on one of his podcasts, but he's like, bro, in a SEAL platoon, the fastest way to correct a problem is to have another SEAL grab you and be like, bro, what the fuck are you doing?
You know why that is? I think I know why that is. And certainly Mr. Stump knows why that is. But I think that's because you have automatic legitimacy and credibility.
Exactly. Yep.
With that person. And they're going to buy in to what you say.
Because when cops hear other people saying, well, what the fuck are you doing? The immediate reaction is defensive.
Yeah.
Well, you don't know what it's like.
Defiant. Outright defiance.
You don't know. You don't know what it's like to put the uniform on. You don't know this. You don't know that. But really what that is doing is you're closing off the ability to hear perspective because you don't think that person has the authority to offer you that perspective.
Right.
So exactly what you say. If someone with already has credibility grabs you and says, hey, that's not how we do business, bro.
Yeah. Because I rub shoulders with you, right?
Yeah.
We're in the field together and I respect you, right? And absolutely, I think that goes a huge, long ways.
I think that's the best thing that the community can do right now. To paint themselves in a better picture is to police our own. And again, I mean, like you said, you had 3 other cops standing there that did not police their own. And I'm not even talking about always in real time, like this is happening and interject.
Right.
I'm saying like at the end of your shift, if you saw someone do something that you thought was just a little sideways, hey bro, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
That's what needs to be happening.
We do horrible with that in law enforcement.
No, we do.
We train driving, fighting, and shooting. And some might say, well, that's the brick and mortar of law enforcement, right? Where we suck at is this face-to-face interaction and saying, hey man, you know what? What's up, dude? That was not like, you weren't using hard cover.
Yeah.
That bush is not hard cover.
Well, and I mean, in the Ranger Battalion, we do what's called an AAR after every single mission, after actions review.
Yeah.
Where you sit down and everybody partakes in it and they go around a circle.
It's not an option.
It's like, hey, what did you think of this? Hey, okay, when we made entry into this room, what team made entry in that room? Oh, it was Alpha 3-1. Okay, Greg, that was your team? All right, so who was in that room? And 5 guys raised their hand.
So I've seen that in the SWAT community.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those debriefs, and I was briefly a part of that community, those debriefs are horrible.
Yeah, they're horrible.
They're brutal.
If you have thin skin,
dude, need not apply. You're not going to have a good time there.
And bro, feelings get hurt, right?
Yeah.
But we're not hurting your feelings to hurt your feelings. We're hurting your feelings so tomorrow we're better.
Yeah.
That's it, man.
Progress, right?
That's it.
I say that to new officers all the time is, are you better today? Number one, did you learn something new today? And if you did, are you now better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's progress.
That's progress, man.
Absolutely.
I dig it. All right. Hey, let's end on this. Since you brought up those other officers and the George Floyd thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to make a prediction?
Oh, boy. So I'll say this kind of as a squishy answer. I've dealt with juries for a large part of my career. You can't convince me that there's like any scientific way a jury will go. I could see where there may be
You're absolutely right.
Right? You've seen it.
I'll tell you, I've seen guys, like 2 guys arrested and prosecuted on the same case.
Same case.
Same prosecutors, same agents, same facts, same circumstances. One guilty, one not guilty.
Yeah. What's up with that?
Happens all the time.
Right. And so
if people think a jury of your peers is going to give you like the absolute facts of what happened and come to a factual conclusion.
Oh no.
This is what I always say about juries. So if you're a criminal and you're listening, this is my advice. Make the jury like you. That's it, man. Make the jury like you. Have some charisma. Talk to them. Make them see you as a human being and not some person that's incarcerated for a crime.
Yeah.
And they don't, dude, nobody wants to lock up a guy that they think is a good-hearted person. Even if maybe he did commit that, but
yeah.
I mean,
but he gets a pass
yeah.
because he seems like a good dude.
Seems like a good dude, right? But I mean, again, another rabbit hole, right? But with those other 3 officers, this is my personal opinion. I think Derek Chauvin's going to get life in jail, life in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's fucked.
Yeah, I don't think that's unrealistic prediction at all.
And I have cop friends that think otherwise. Not to say that what he did wasn't egregious, but they just think like his team will be able to fucking paint this picture, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think Derek Chauvin, life in jail, life in prison. I think the other 3 won't be convicted.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly can go that way.
And again, yeah, just like you said, it can go either way.
It
But,
could. I could see in
if
a
I
situation.
was doing Vegas odds and I had to do a split, that's where I'd one in prison, the other aren't.
You may even get 1 or 2 to turn and be a witness and not be charged criminally or receive a lot of leniency. That could happen too.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, I'll take your squishy answer.
All right.
And we'll call it a night. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this up, man?
No, just thanks for the opportunity and the time to just have open dialogue, man, open discourse, because for me, I mean, a lot of your, I don't know. I don't want to assume this, but I'm definitely more along the lines of what can we do to unify? And I don't think you're opposite that.
Bro, yeah. And let me expound on that for just a second. I want us to unify as a country. I want peace.
Yeah.
I'm like William Wallace when he came back to the farm and, God willing, raise a family, right? That's what he wanted. But war came to his doorstep and now it's fucking on. And so, bro, I'm right there with you. I hope all this washes over. I hope after the presidential election, whoever's elected can kind of bring our country back from this brink of chaos. And I would love to see that. Bro, I want to buy a sailboat and I just want to have fun with my kids.
Yeah.
But
I'll be a good deckhand.
but if it goes that path, I'm ready for it. And I think we have to be,
Yeah.
So you're all set then?
Yeah.
Get out of here?
I'm all set,
right, man. So for anyone out there, I wanted Scott to be one of my first guests, but life happens. We weren't able to get him on till episode 9, but there's so much more to talk about, and I'm sure he'll be back on in the near future. So thanks for listening, and that'll be a wrap.